So looking at early look, and maybe we'll get you back next week for a quick chat to kind of follow this up. But early look at Bama. A lot of times I like to ask in some of these bigger games, like who needs it more, but there truly is no who needs it more. Like it is an elimination game. I cannot see
Right.
either team winning this without just like loads of chaos, right? Like Clemson dropping 2 games and Miami dropping 2 games. Like just, it would take an inordinate amount of chaos, in my opinion, for either one of these teams to lose this game and get in. So it truly is like an elimination game. We have a playoff game coming next week, and it will be all the hype. It will be all the hoopla. So there's not really a good answer of who's more desperate for it, because I think it's, win or go home at this point, a November 9th playoff game. But who is in a better position maybe in this game? Both teams have had their struggles. Both teams have had their issues. We talked earlier about turnovers and penalties and, blowing games, costing yourselves games because of mistakes. Like, who is in a better position here?
If this game were played in Tuscaloosa, I'd say Bama. And so just to throw this out there, I think because of wherever the game is being played at the current moment is where I would lean. And TJ, to the point there, I was just thinking when you were asking, I'm like, if you're Kalen DeBoer, I think Kalen DeBoer in year one can still have grace in year one if they go 9-3. I really don't think Brian Kelly can get out of the regular season without 10 wins. So I do think that there comes a part where I think that it may be LSU because it's at home, maybe, but both teams have had the same amount of type of struggles. So I would say LSU only because it's in Baton Rouge. Again, if it was in Tuscaloosa, I would say Bama.
How early look again, not doing a full dive on this, but just the issues that Bama has are at times somewhat similar to some of the ones that LSU has shown when in games they've struggled with turnovers and things. But I do wonder, like you mentioned, playing on the road. I do wonder, they certainly struggled on the road at Vandy, at Tennessee. Obviously, the state of Tennessee kind of has their bragging rights against letting some naysayers know. But I do think that playing on the road with a team that does struggle with penalties, a team that does struggle with, it seems like, just atmospheres and pressure and stuff, I think that's a pretty big benefit for LSU. I'd assume that LSU plays slightly better at home. Both teams get the benefit of the bye. So I home and away always makes a big deal in college football. I'm not trying to oversell that point. Not every place is Baton Rouge. Not every place is Death Valley. And not every Bama team that we've seen is this capable of making mistakes in hostile environments and turning the ball over and having penalties. So I think it's even bigger than it normally is.
Well, and to your point, Brian Kelly has only lost one game in Baton Rouge. He's 13-0 at night. I mean, they just don't. TJ, again, things kind of right themselves. I mean, I think like there was a streak there where LSU was like 47-5 at night at home, and like 4 of the losses came against Bama. The only other one. Speaking of state owning, the only other one was Troy, right? Like Troy, that time Troy came up in here and won. But they do play better at home. And look, when I mentioned earlier about a blessing in disguise. Have any opinion you want about Brian Kelly. It is what it is. Do you think he's goofy? You think he's a politician? Whatever you want to make of him. He doesn't lose coming out of a loss. He just doesn't. And that's not an LSU thing, TJ. He did it at Notre Dame. He did it at Cincinnati. He did it at Central Michigan. What does he have in common? Over 34 years of experience. Yeah, the likelihood of you knocking him off, like him losing back-to-back games, only has happened one time to him, and it was in one season when he went 4-8 at Notre Dame. Then he had a 10-win, 11-win, 12-win seasons after that. So I would say that I still feel confident about where they are. Me, I've been on your show enough, and I've put out enough content enough. Like, if I don't feel good about a game, I'm going to tell you. Like, when we talked about LSU versus Florida State, and we did the simulator thing with the game, I'm like,
yeah.
Look, man, I don't feel good about this. Like, I mean, I just don't feel good about this at all. This makes me, I got the bubble guts behind this. I'm sitting in church taking shots at Florida State fans, which in retrospect was a dumb shit. But anyway, I just think that they play so much better at night, regardless of who the head coach is. But here's another thing too, GJ. The thing that worries me the most. What does Kalen DeBoer look like after a bye week? Does this Alabama team come out here and they get a week to reset and get refocused and do the things that they need to do? Do they get off to an early start like what they did against Georgia? How does LSU cover Ryan Williams? There's a lot of things that LSU is going to have to answer, but I mean, I feel confident in them, but there's still a lot of worries and concerns. I mean, can you stop them running the ball? Jalen Milroe's going to run zone read. And you have not stopped it all year. So what are you going to do now? So now you got to, TJ, this is what I talked about just a minute, like literally in the last segment. Like you're going to find out how focused this team is, how much the culture is built, like all these things about Brian Kelly, and his team, you're going to find out because I don't think that you're a tough football team right now. You're not a tough football team. You know, like TJ, I remember teams, you know, that LSU would have or Bama would have, brother. Like, you know, I remember O.J. Howard. I don't know if you remember the tight end O.J. Howard. Like I talked to O.J. Howard and he like retweeted it and stuff. And O.J. Howard told us one time that the first practice that he got in the NFL, it felt like he had described it to a game like he had just played LSU, right? Like that, like. And that was because of the physicality of what you're going up against. Where is that physicality? Like, look, man, I'm not trying to call out players or coaches and question your toughness, but the film doesn't lie, right? Like when you have an opponent down on the ground, don't help him up, knock his head off. Like, and that's, you know, those are the small things. Like, I don't like you. You don't like me. I hope your mama's gumbo tastes like pure dookie. You know, like I don't like you. Knock them out. And I wonder if you go into a bye week with both of these teams, how does that work? Like, how does that transpire? So, I mean, look, I'm not trying to call them out, but there comes a part, TJ, where like you got to do it on the ground. You can't run the football. Like, knock him into break them. Yeah. And that's why you lose games like A&M, because when you're running the football and you're not finishing drives, you're not finishing running plays. Those are the things that stack up over a four-quarter game. So I think both teams, quite honestly, have had issues with it. And the tougher team and the better culture is going to win this one. Yeah. I'm convinced. Like whoever's got the better culture is going to win this one.
Yeah, and you kind of think like, man, if you're zooming way out and you're looking at it pretty macro, we've talked about this, like maybe getting smacked and getting kind of, you know, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but just kind of, yeah, I'm sure they were embarrassed by the
it's embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Maybe that's a good thing to happen right before a bye. You know, I love the bye before this week. It's get 2 weeks of hype. Same thing almost always happens with the cocktail party. You know, they get a bye before that, and not that game matters a ton this year, but just, you know, get my subtle shots in with a team that's 1-7. But yeah, I do think that I like that. You know, in games where the cocktail party has mattered, you know, it's cool to get the 2 weeks of hype, and then same thing with this yearly. But yeah, that's probably a good thing for LSU. And then, you know, I mean, from the LSU perspective, you're hoping that maybe Bama, I can't imagine them taking their foot off the pedal in this, just knowing how big the game is. But maybe you're thinking, well, they won their game by 30. Maybe they'll ease up a bit. Maybe they think they've, you know, gotten something. And obviously, I think Missouri and LSU are different opponents. But yeah, it'll be, you know, you're right though. The coach that can kind of get the refocus, the coach that can come out of the bye week stronger, the coach that can, you know, instill some of that, you know, more physicality. You know, I don't think Bama's been an incredibly physical team this year either. You know, I think that's the, you know, you're right. That's the coach that's going to win. Now, obviously, you know, there's variance with turnovers and massive mistakes and things like that are going to come into it. If either team loses the turnover battle by 2+, they're going to lose the game unless they play Duke and win the turnover battle by 6 and still find a way to lose. But just insane there. But yeah, I think the bye week's gonna, you know, it's great for us fans to let the hype go for 2 weeks, but it's probably really good for both teams. And whichever coach can kind of nail home their points this week is probably going to be the one to come out on top.
I completely agree, man. I mean, I couldn't say it any better than that. I mean, I feel ironically, if you're asking me about a 1-game sample, I feel good coming off a loss with the head coach that you have versus, you know, like. Because, TJ, I don't know how much this team would have reacted to the pressure, right? Like, I don't, you know, they haven't reacted to the pressure. I mean, and listen, I'm going to defend BK for one thing, because we do film studies on Mondays and we talk about it. Listen, man, there does come a level of that the players aren't executing, right? Like, I mean, there comes a level of, hey, brother, you just had a wide receiver go 75 yards on a slant route, and he's there like 17 other times. You might want to throw him the football. But it's also been BK's fault that he's not like finding that, right? Like that he's not, like saying, hey, we might need to get Aaron Anderson the football. So I'm not trying to like defend him there, but I mean, look, how are you going to respond? TJ, you cannot go to a Cheez-It Bowl. I'm going to keep saying that. I love Cheez-Its. They are the cheese cracker of America, okay? I love them to death. But I don't love them so much that I want to go there in 2 of the last 3 years. I don't. I mean, I'm tired of – and I think that's where – I think that's where the fan base is. All right, listen. You had a Heisman Trophy winner and 2 first-round wide receivers. You had to rebuild. I mean, you had 39 scholarship players. I mean, you get the pass. You get a pass, but then you don't get a pass in a way. Like, I mean, okay, like we still understand it. You go to a Cheez-It Bowl again with a 12-team playoff, oh, boy, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, the bowls get progressively worse because all the good bowls are, in the playoffs now.
Think about this. If LSU wins out, there's a strong likelihood, TJ, that they play at home in a first-round bye.
Yeah.
I mean, first round, not first-round bye. But there's a strong likelihood. And by the way, I'm going to throw this out there, too. If you're in administration, TJ, I don't know if you remember this, and I'm sure that you covered it here, but – I'm old enough to remember when me and Joe were sitting there in the offseason talking about like, hey, bro, you get how much from ESPN for one playoff game? Like how much? $10 million if you host like for both teams? Like what? Like teams that make it to the championship game, TJ, they're estimating that they're going to bring in an additional revenue of $60 million. Well, you're in a dogfight for the number 1 player in the country and Bryce Underwood. I mean, NIL is a big thing. Like, hey, big guy, you might want to get to that's the thing, TJ. Like, imagine saying to Georgia, like, hey, man, if you get there, even if you lose, give Kirby Smart 50 to 60 million extra month, 60 million extra. What you think that man's going to do? This line in 3 years is going to be so nasty. He's going to have 27 different NFL draft picks on that defense. That's the part where I'm talking about, too. It's even behind the scenes administrative stuff. TJ, even if you get beat at home, who gives a Rudy poo? Like, get there. That's what this fan base wants. And to be honest with you, looking at Bama, if Bama gets to a playoff, there's nothing you can say about DeBoer. He had 32 players that left his program. 32, TJ. I mean, like, what are you going to say about that? Yeah. Like, he had an offense and defense and depth pieces that literally left. Like, give that man a break, too.
Yeah. Blake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work? I know you do national stuff and LSU stuff. Where can people get all that?
I didn't know that I had a hair piece. The hair gel didn't help with its alfalfa side here. But anyway, Ruffino and Joe show Sunday, Monday, and Wednesdays. We also do recorded stuff like on Tuesdays. We break down as many games throughout the week as we can. I greatly appreciate it if everybody goes over there and subscribes. And then just AYS Sports. We're doing SEC. We do LSU. So, TJ, really, I sit here all day and talk about football, and I feel like I talk about football all day long. I guess I should be. That's my job to do it, I guess. But that's where they can find me.
Blake, I appreciate you, man.
See you, man. We'll have a good one.
Thanks, buddy.